welcome back to the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Member Connection. I'm your host, Eric Knowles, and yeah, I know you're probably tired of me saying how excited I am about our guests, but you know, the road to entrepreneurship is not an easy one, and I tell you, I'm just excited. And this guy, he's been an entrepreneur before he even knew he was an entrepreneur. He had a restaurant named after him. He didn't even know I was going there.
Sure did.
Andres, and you know, he learned from a great guy, his dad, Audley Coakley. So Andre, great to see you here, man.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So like, if you didn't know, as I said, he had a restaurant named after him, and you know, I'm sure you were in there running it with your dad a little bit every now and then.
Yeah.
I mean, you were a young guy, but that's what it was. But it instilled something in you because, again, your dad being a realtor and the things that he did, here you are now, an entrepreneur in your own right, owning your own business, helping people get basically their finances together. But before we go there, tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Andre Coakley, president of Credit 360, a local credit repair company that helps individuals not only repair their personal credit, but get their business acumen together from a business standpoint. I believe credit has been somewhat of a taboo type of scenario, and that's mainly because of misinformation. You know, a lot of times we go through life, we think that we understand credit until we get denied, then we realize, oh, we don't really understand this dismal game of credit.
Right. You know, most of us are on Instagram now, whatever, and I was looking at this thing, and they were talking about, this guy was talking about poor people make money to pay bills. Mm-hmm. Middle-class people make money to make sure that they got enough money to pay their bills.
Exactly.
And so on and so forth. But again, at the end of the day, it's about credit to move from one point to another from a financial perspective here in this world today. So you start, as you said, it's Credit 360.
Correct.
What do you see, well, I know the answer to the question, but how do people get in trouble with credit?
They mainly get in trouble, I'm going to say, for, first of all, lack of information.
Okay.
That lack of information comes from, you know, in school, we're taught everything except financial literacy. And I think that's a very big part of it. We learn our ABCs, we learn how to count, but we don't learn how to necessarily manage money from a credit standpoint. And it doesn't matter from what walk of life or what your hierarchy of education is, you're going to encounter credit sometime in your lifetime.
Right.
So we want to try to get in front of that as much as possible, try to teach our youth. I do go into our schools, teaching fourth graders about the importance of credit. And a lot of times people say, well, why would you speak to a fourth grader? Because we want to get to them before society gets to them. Society gets to them, social media gets to them, and then here it is, now we don't have a lack of information, we have misinformation.
Right.
All right, so, you know, and that's sometimes even a bigger hurdle to get over. It was misinformation versus lack of information.
Right. And, you know, and I remember growing up, my aunts, uncles, you know, parents that say, you know, save your money. Mm-hmm. But no one ever talked about credit.
Right.
And even as a young adult, you know, you hear, I didn't know what refinancing was about.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
Because we get caught up in having, whether it's a home, and it's probably more from a home perspective versus credit cards, but it's a credit card issue as well.
Correct.
But from a home perspective, I remember my first house interest rate were 11%.
Right.
Back in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And here now, they've jumped up to what, 6-7%?
Yeah, we're crying, you know, because they were at 2%, right?
Right.
You know, so yes.
Yeah, but going back to this whole thing about refinance and refi, can you talk about that a little bit? Because that deals with credit.
Yeah, so refinancing is taking an existing loan or a mortgage, in this case, we'll say for an example, and let's say you purchased at a particular time when your credit score wasn't good, or just the market was a little bit inflated during that time, such as in the 80s. Mm-hmm. With 11% interest rate, of course, you have a lot more output going towards interest than you would have principal.
Okay.
So ideally, what you would want to do is we want to refinance that particular mortgage for a lower interest rate. Now, there's pros and cons to refinancing. One of the pros is hopefully you're refinancing for a lesser interest rate.
Right.
All right. The negative thing is you're going to extend the terms back onto that loan. So let's say hypothetically we're in your original mortgage for 10 years. However you want, and it was a 30-year mortgage, and now you're actually refinancing another 30-year mortgage. Of course, you'd added 10 years to that mortgage. However, there's that fluctuation that might take place that might be beneficial because now you have a reduction in interest rate. Or you might even refinance it for a shorter term as well. You can do a 15-year mortgage.
Right.
So, and it comes with refinancing, just so you guys know, the longer you borrow the money, the more interest you pay.
Correct.
So ideally, if you're borrowing loans and you're borrowing money, you want to try to shorten the term. However, the shortening the term increases the monthly payment. So you have to kind of find that happy balance.
Right. Going back to being an entrepreneur, what made you decide that you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
As you stated, seeing my father, grow his restaurant business, and my dad was a serial entrepreneur. I've never known my dad to work for another individual other than himself. And it's
Right.
funny how those principles kind of just passed over to me when I graduated from college. The first job I had was working at my father's mortgage company.
Okay.
Which led me to even to credit repair. During that time, I got to see people's financial statements, bank statements, credit reports, and then I was able to learn what trends were helping individuals get through that underwriting process for home ownership from a credit standpoint, not knowing that it was preparing me to own a credit repair company 10 years later.
Okay. And, again, I talk to the members that come on here, and yeah, it's one thing to say, yeah, I want to work for myself. It's one thing, but to open that door to pay yourself, to pay employees, as I say, you have to get out and hunt.
Exactly.
So go through that process in terms of, in your mind, of it. Everybody can't do it.
Being an entrepreneur most definitely is not for everybody. As you said, you have to constantly be on the hunt, right? There's no such thing as you having, the fillet placed in front of you. It's your job to actually go find the actual meal and then fillet it yourself. The beautiful thing about that is the freedom that comes behind it. And, that's one of the things that, propels me when it comes to entrepreneurship, the freedom to be able to kind of maneuver in my own space, to be able to kind of create for my own, try to create generational wealth. But it's most definitely not for the faint-hearted. There are plenty of days where, this big burly man, goes home and he wants to boo-hoo cry, right?
Right.
Because, the decisions that we make as an entrepreneur impact us as a human being. And before you are a business owner, you are a human being.
Right.
Right. And your business is your baby. So when your baby's not performing well, you look at the parent and you kind of question the parenthood, right? And that's where that entrepreneurship comes into play.
Right. You wonder, well, is this what I'm supposed to do? Do I need to go out and get me a real job, or whether we call it a real job, or get a check from somebody else, versus biting that bullet and hanging in there? Because, again, the one thing is that if you continue to do the right thing, that it'll turn. And so, and that's the biggest, I would say probably one of the biggest challenges is knowing that it will turn. But we'll get back to that. We're going to take a little break and get a message from one of our supporters.
At Convey, we're not only dedicated to solving today's biggest challenges facing healthcare organizations, we're also committed to predicting and planning for tomorrow's challenges by uniting a family of companies. We combine powerful technology with robust data analytics to deliver integrated end-to-end solutions that achieve meaningful results. Start your journey towards transformative business performance with Convey.
Well, we're back. It's the Miami-Dade Chamber Member Connection. I'm here with Andre Coakley, 360 Credit. Credit. A lot of people And I'm sure I've screwed up my credit over the years, but you know, that's one thing I look at, the credit score. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Credit is just like it's your credit report is a history of your financial relationships. And just like in life, you know, it can take you 20 years to build a relationship and you can burn it in 20 seconds, right? Same aspect that comes with credit, and a lot of times credit gets burnt. Again, it's not because of wanting or the willingness to want to burn it. It's the simple fact of misinformation or lack of information.
Okay.
All right. However, you know, trying to understand, and I understand that a lot of individuals don't understand the credit scoring system as far as how it works. Keep in mind, it was constructed by billion-dollar companies, and it's not made for the individual to actually be able to cheat the system, right? The system is built against the individual. It's not a conspiracy theory, anything like that, you know. However, their job is to protect and mitigate risk. That's what that credit score is actually doing, trying to say how you actually handle your finances from that particular standpoint. But a lot of times we just have lack of information.
So again, going back to the credit score, companies, and obviously your 360 credit.
Correct.
Going back to the credit score, companies are either going to give you a loan based on that credit score. Your interest rate is going to be based on that credit score. You can walk into buy a car with no down payment,
Correct.
with 0% interest based on that credit score.
Correct.
So tell folks, obviously paying your bills is one thing, but it's more than just paying your bills.
Correct. So I like to explain first of all, your credit score is how good you look, right? That's your outer appearance. Your credit report is how healthy you are.
Okay.
All right. A lot of times we get caught up on the credit score. I have clients who have 700 to 800 credit scores who still get denied for loans.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
Wait. See, you just threw me for a loop there, because again, and I'm sure, and everybody's thinking, you just said someone who has a credit score 700, 800 plus will be denied credit?
Correct.
How does that happen?
The way that works is, unfortunately, your credit score only determines what interest rate that bank is going to give you. So
Okay.
your credit score puts you on a matrix or a chart, okay? However, your credit report determines whether you're going to be approved or not. For example, I can have a client with a 700 credit score. However, he could have had a repossession, a bankruptcy, a charge-off, a collection on the report, which is a disqualifying factor at that particular point.
So the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Exactly. So I can have a client who has a 600 credit score applying for a credit card, a client with a 750 credit score applying for the credit card. Majority of the time, that client with a 750 credit score is going to be a little bit more solid from a credit standpoint. However, there could be something on that report that disqualifies them from that actual loan when that person with the 600 credit score might not have that disqualifying factor. They might get an interest rate of 18%, right? Versus the person with the 750 credit score who got an interest rate of 8%, 9%, all right? So that's where that risk layering comes into play. So the credit score is important. However, the credit report is imperative.
So talking about the credit report, so you hear about, you know, cleaning up your credit report. You hear of companies saying they can clean your credit. Talk about that a little bit.
Credit repair is, okay, so there's a lot of misinformation once again, all right? So we have social media platforms putting 1 year and 2 year processes into a 2-minute commercial. So what happens is you hear this guru talk about, oh, you repair your credit, you can get it done, blah, 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 but he's really talking about a 2-year process, but he just microwaved the process.
Oh, wow.
For a sales pitch. Credit repair is actually finding inconsistencies on how the actual creditor or bureaus are reporting that information. So the example I like to give, let's say right now I commit a crime, all right? I go beat somebody up after this interview. However, when the arresting officer comes to arrest me, he doesn't read me my rights. I go to jail for 2 days, I get a good attorney. The attorney can prove that that officer didn't read me my rights. Even though I was guilty and beat that gentleman up in the parking lot, the county's gonna drop the charges because they didn't follow process and procedure. All right, so I was guilty, however, the county wasn't in compliance with actually recording or documenting that guilty process. then that's where the actual, in that case, the criminal would get off. In this case, from a credit repairing standpoint, that's when you can get the account removed off the credit report, because the creditors have what we call the Fair Credit Reporting Act that they have to abide by. Information in your credit report has to hit 3 benchmarks. It has to be timely, has to be accurate, and has to be verifiable. If they're missing one of those elements, that's what gives you the grounds to get the information removed off the report.
Say that again?
It must be timely, accurate, and verifiable.
Okay.
If it doesn't meet those benchmarks, that's what gives the individual the grounds to get that information removed off the credit report.
You know, and it's interesting. I just dealt with some stuff on my credit report. I had paid off a loan, and somehow there was $30 still on that loan, and I thought I had paid it off. And 6 months down the road, I'm getting a report saying that, you know, I'm getting a ding on my credit report that I've been late.
Correct.
And so obviously you don't want to be late because that's one of those dings that hits your report.
Correct.
But the thing that I was able to do, I was able to at least call them and said, hey, I've been with you for this long. I've had this loan. I thought I paid it off in June, and they actually removed it.
Correct.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's what we call a goodwill request. Because you have a good rapport with that particular creditor, they would be willing to get that information cleared off the credit report. But that's in a very isolated incident, and that's normally people who have very good track records. They're going to look at your past performance with them, but not only your past performance with them, they're going to look at your credit report and see if this is a consistent behavior.
Okay.
All right. If it's an isolated incident, they're of course going to be more prone to assist you as a loyal customer to get that rectified, because they don't want that relationship to be dragging you in your financial endeavors.
Right. So for a young person just coming out of college, so I know, you know, that's where a lot of creditors go to the colleges, and, you know, they sign up folks who are seniors and juniors and to get credit cards. Talk to our young folks about credit and what they should be looking out for.
The first thing is you have to be careful, because they are preying on college campuses. I got my first credit card when I was in when I was in college. Back then it was it wasn't even Macy's, it was Burdine. So I don't even want to even go how far back that was, right? So I had the Burdine's credit card. But it's funny because not paying that Burdine's credit card dragged into a process. When I turned 25, I was purchasing my first house. And I actually wound up having to pay that old Burdine's collection that was on my credit report. And back then, you know, I can still remember the Nautica outfit that I bought with that particular credit card. However, lack of information, not knowing, okay, that this back then $50 outfit was really going to cost me $70 or $80. Which is even deeper than that, because it almost cost me home ownership.
Right.
Right? You understand? And it was just not having any lack of, and it's funny because my mom always had great credit, right? I remember whenever my mom used to go to places and they would run her credit report, they would be somewhat shocked that a single woman would have such a high credit score. But she always instilled into me, but it's just like, you know, parenthood. Your parents can tell you the fire is hot.
But till you put your hand
in that fire, you realize, okay, it's really hot.
Yeah.
You understand? And that was a pivotal moment in my life. Just understanding, okay, your past is not always your past.
Right.
Sometimes your past is going to actually be drugged into your present.
Right. You mentioned a word in terms of, like you said, going, having that credit, and I lost my train of thought there. But again, you're being basically penalized, and in coming out of that. Talk about that, coming out of that. You were saying you were getting your house, but then you had a, what was it?
Charge-off.
Charge-off, that's the word I'm looking for.
So yeah, so a charge-off is an account that has gone over 150 days delinquent with a creditor. So let's say I went and I get a Macy's account. Macy's gives me that line of credit. 150 days go by, I don't actually fulfill my obligation with paying it. Macy's will then sell that actual debt to a collection company. Now, let's say for example purposes, this debt was a $1,000 debt. Macy's is going to sell this debt to a collection company for anywhere between 10 to 15 cents on the dollar. So that a collection company is going to pay anywhere between $100 to $150 for this debt. Then that collection company would contact the individual, say, hey, we got a deal of a lifetime. You give us $700 for this $1,000 debt, and we'll actually, we'll show it to being paid on your credit report.
So I got to cut you off because we run out of time. And I mean, it's always, this is the way it always happens.
Right.
But if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
You can reach me on my website, www.credit360.biz, or you can most definitely find me by phone at 305-235-4848.
You can reach the chamber at 305-751-8648, m-dcc.org. This has been the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us.